Today's video, we're going to discuss the pros and cons of Zone 2 training, the Maffetone method of running that you can utilize to get and keep in Zone 2 training, and why I feel using the rate of perceived exertion, or easier pronounced RPE, is essential for achieving a consistent and effective results in your endurance running. So let's move on to the pros and cons of actually using Zone 2 as a running discipline. Okay, so let's look at the pros and cons of Zone 2 running. Well, the pros, the initial one is pretty obvious. It's aerobic base building. Training in Zone 2 strengthens the cardiovascular system, allowing the heart to pump more blood and oxygen to the muscles, thereby basically enhancing your endurance. So it's fundamental when it comes to endurance running. It's also fat burning. As the body relies on fat as its primary fuel source in Zone 2, runners can improve their fat metabolism and prolong their energy reserves during long runs. Now, this is very much misunderstood, but basically, the faster or the harder you run, or your body perceives the harder you run, the more likely you are to be using carbohydrate stores versus fat stores. Actually, you have more fat stores than you do carbohydrate. So if you can get your body to use fat, that's going to be more effective. What people don't understand with Zone 2 is that people see Zone 2 as slow running, but it's only slow when you first start in most cases, because that's your capacity. There are many people that can run really very, very quickly in Zone 2 and be burning fat. So that means they can run faster for longer. And this is why you'll hear all this thing about being fat adapted and everything like that, and special diets. But really, if you just focus, that's the real benefit of Zone 2, of when you first start out. Yes, you're not going to be at that stage, but if you do the Zone 2 runs and build up that aerobic base, that's the real key benefit. You've also, it's better for active recovery. Running in Zone 2 can aid recovery after hard workouts, or Zone 1 for that matter, by increasing blood flow and flushing waste products from the legs, basically. Also, reduce risk of injury. Basically, you're running lower intensity Zone 2 training, reduce your stress on the joints and the muscles. It's less impact. It's pretty obvious. So you're not going to have the high impact that a lot of runners do their running in. And we will come to Zone 3, a quick bit on Zone 3 in a minute. Most runners think they're in Zone 2 quite often, but they're running in a quasi Zone 3, and outline how you will know that in a moment. And because of that, they are running too hard. They don't think they are, but they are. And because of that, that's why they often get injured. So it's very important to know you're in a Zone 2, and that's what we're going to come to in a little while. But before we do that, just let's look at what the potential cons of running in Zone 2 are. The cons of Zone 2, it's time consuming. Developing a strong aerobic base through Zone 2 training requires patience and commitment. It can take longer to see results compared to high intensity workouts. This is why so many runners love high intensity workouts. You press the high intensity button and you get results. This means many runners actually have underdeveloped Zone 2 capacity. And it's a bit like building a skyscraper on low foundations if you don't have that capacity, and we'll come to that. And it can be monotonous, it can be boring, sticking to lower intensity initially for some runners, what they will consider slower runs, and they're sometimes bored by the pace, and they're bored because their egos feel like it's taken a bit of a stride. This is why so many runners will run actually in Zone 3, which is what we're going to come to now, quickly outline that, and then we will move on to how the best ways are to get into and stay in zone 2. So you've known the pros, you know the cons of zone 2. We're going to look now if you're running zone 3, what the pitfalls are there, and then we'll get into the meat of the sandwich from there on. Okay, so what are the pitfalls of drifting into zone 3 where you think you're doing an easier run? Well, it can lead to an increase in fatigue as the body starts to rely, as I said earlier, on carbohydrates for energy. This can deplete energy stores more quickly and delay recovery, potentially leading to overtraining and increased injury risk. This is why, so many runners do most of their easy runs too hard and most of their speed work too easy. I call it the quasi zone 2 and 4 or 5. So a lot of runners will think they're in zone 2, and what they're actually doing is a quasi lower zone 3, and they're running that zone 2 too hard. And then they end up either injured, burnt out, or they don't get the adaptations they want. Grey zone for a good reason, because it does tend to get confused because of the reasons it's just explained. It's very easy to think you're in zone 2 when you're not, or it's very easy to think you're in zone 4, even sometimes perhaps 5 when you're not. And actually, all you're doing is working too hard in your easy runs and not hard enough in your faster runs. You're not getting the adaptations, but you're getting all the potential risk of injury or burnout. So with that said, let's move on to a methadone method and heart rate zones, how you can utilize those as a potential way to keep yourself and know when you're in zone 2. Okay, the methadone running method and heart rate zones. The methadone method developed by Dr. Phil Maffetone is a heart rate-based approach that emphasizes aerobic development through lots of low-intensity running by calculating heart rate. Roughly, I think it's 118 minus your age. Runners can maintain a pace that remains within zone 2. While this method can be effective in building aerobic base and is proven to be, it sometimes doesn't take into account individual differences in fitness levels and age. I know that there's been some changes with that. I mean, if you've been training for a certain amount of years or had a certain amount of success, you can add on, say, 5 beats or take 5 beats, or I think can work really well for a lot of people. My experience with some runners, they found it frustrating because that heart rate side of things can be challenging. I've made videos on heart rate. I'm not scathing of it. I just don't think you should be wedded to it. If you're utilizing this as your heart rate, you haven't got a lot of chance of accuracy to begin with. And you should have. If you're going to take heart rate seriously, invest in a chest strap. It doesn't cost that much money. I think that once you've got that, then finding a decent benchmark. So what we do with our runners, as long as they're fit enough, is a 10-minute warm-up, 30-minute, as hard as they can go for 30-minute run. From that, we can get pace and heart rate zones. And obviously, we're going to discuss the power of rate of precipitation in a minute, but we can get those heart rate zones. So then, you've got an idea of where your zone 2 would be for your heart rate, and that can be very, very useful. But where it falls down is you've got lag times with heart rate. If you're going up a hill, your heart rate won't be showing the exertion straight away of going up that hill. When you go down the hill, your heart rate won't be showing the ease that you're going down that hill straight away. There will be a lag. Over long distances, your heart rate will rise because you've been working for a long time, but that may not tie in with the level of true exertion that you're having, which is what we're going to come to in a minute. So I think heart rate can be very useful. What I tend to do is tie in heart rate as a secondary metric with perceived effort for lower intensity running, and then use pace as a secondary metric, and our high intensity stuff and use perceived effort as the primary metric there. Obviously, things like this you've got to try them yourself, but I do find that heart rate is very, very effective, but people can start to take it as a religion. And that's when it doesn't work so well, because their watch is telling them one thing and they're feeling another. And that's what we're going to come to. We're going to look at the power of the rate of perceived exertion or running to feel how I feel that is your best way, the gold standard to really keep in a zone 2 actively. So the power rate of perceived exertion, or much simpler RPE, is my favorite way of running generally, particularly if you're going to utilize zone 2 training. It can deliver much more consistent and effective results by paying attention to one's breathing and effort level, and the ability to speak while you run is an amazing way and a simple way to know if you're in zone 2. The way that I do it with a lot of my runners, I say to them, if you had a headset on for speaking on your mobile phone and I rang you while you were running in zone 2, me and you could have a nice long chat, even if you were running for 45 plus minutes. But the main thing is I'll be, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing something at the moment? And you tell, I'm out for a run. I would hear the effort, but it wouldn't be, if you're in zone 3, you could talk, but you wouldn't want to. And you definitely couldn't talk for the whole 45 minutes easily and effortlessly. The thing is, your body doesn't recognize pace. That's a metric we've created. It's a very useful metric. I like pace. It gets me PBs, but it's a human-made thing. Your body only recognizes effort. So if you run up the hill in 10 minutes per mile and you run downhill in 10 minutes per mile, there are two different experiences. They are both 10 minutes per mile, but one is different. One going up the hill is a lot harder. Your body recognizes effort. So why not utilize that fantastic system that you have in your body and use feel? Well, the reason why is people don't trust their bodies, and they trust technology more than their bodies. And this is one of the biggest challenges when we take runners on. If they're doing quite a lot of zone 2 running, that we get them to run conversationally. They're telling us their heart rate isn't right. We say, well, ignore that for now. Oh, I'm running at a slower pace, basically. And I say, running at a slower pace for whom? Are you running at a slower pace compared to your colleagues? Are you running at a slower pace than your ego? Because the problem is, so often our brain is spending fitness capital that our body doesn't yet have. So I hope you've enjoyed the video and got something from this. So bottom line is, to conclude, lots of people are running in zone 3 when they think they're running in zone 2. If you're doing that, then you're more likely to not get the adaptations or change or progress that you want. So zone 2 is vital to build the foundation for your running skyscraper to actually improve. Even if you are quite a successful endurance runner and you've flatlined a bit, you're probably pressing the intensity button. You might want to look and see if you're aerobically deficient. This can be a case even with quite successful runners, and start building up that zone 2. Running in zone 2 initially can feel slow, can feel monotonous. But remember, you have to meet yourself where you are. Don't start spending mental capital, i.e., I want to be running at this pace, that your body actually hasn't got yet, because that's where you will overtrain, underdeliver. So I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I'd love to hear your comments on, have you found zone 2? Have you found heart rate effective? What works for you? And share away. I'll try and comment back as much as possible. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Bye for now.